Well, there's a very fluid situation, this potential podcast, so we don't have a title for it yet. But we do have a tremendous guest. Shane Will the Thrill Willis is with us, and our producer. Oh, boy, he's a real beauty. Adam the Admiral Holtzman here as we pioneer this thing. Will the Thrill, are you there?
I'm here, my friend. Excited to be on the podcast.
Well, I'm going to tell you right now, you and I have had some more exciting libations over the years, but as we film this on 10 a.m. on Friday, do you know that in the land down under where you and I have not been together, it just became your birthday tomorrow?
Yes, it is going to be my birthday tomorrow. Normally at 10 a.m. back in the day, we'd be teeing it up right now, and we're not going to do that. What are we going to do?
Well, I'm going to have some because you got me. I'm trying to get back to my fighting weight. And so you got me on this really delicious apple cider vinegar. So
yeah, it's potent.
It's potent. Thank God we're doing this on Zoom, I guess. So if we ever go down to Sydney, Australia, Will the Thrill, it just literally became your birthday there. Happy birthday, my great friend.
Thanks, buddy.
Wow. That better give me a six-pack. Will the Thrill, with your birthday coming up, we have so many things I want to dive into. I guess the first thing I want to ask you, one of the great compliments I ever received was becoming an honorary Westerner from the Western Hockey League, and you split time between Prince George, Lethbridge, where you almost won a Memorial Cup. When we talk about the grind that is the West, pretend you're in the Louvre right now and paint as good of a picture for people that don't understand maybe a particular experience that really conveys what a grind it is in the Western Hockey League.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is you have so many, hardworking character guys that go into that league to play back when I was there. But as you talk about the grind, it's the bus trips to get to games. You're not going in the night before. You're going in the day of. You're leaving school early. You're getting on the bus. The closest trip for us was only a 2-hour bus ride, so it wasn't bad from Prince Albert to Saskatoon, or Lethbridge to Medicine Hat was close. But some of the trips you're looking at getting on the bus, it's a good 6-hour bus ride going into a game. So you're catching your pregame naps on a bus floor in the seats the best you can. You're getting home, you're getting up, you're getting back to school the next morning on time for classes. So I think the grind of it is just the travel and the way, you push each and every day. You're on the ice every day. You're getting out of school early. And around the leagues now, between the Western Hockey League, the OHL, and even the Quebec Major Junior League, I think they've taken so many things that the National Hockey League does to prepare its players to make sure they're at their best. And I think it just continues to get better and better at every level, starting at the National Hockey League level, and what these other leagues are really doing to provide for each and every one of their players.
What was the longest, you told me about the day of a game. What is the longest bus ride you ever had in your years in the West?
The longest bus ride, although it was a good bus ride home, the year we went to the Memorial Cup, we ended up sweeping Patrick Marleau and the Seattle Thunderbirds in Seattle. We were so excited. Our coach said, let's go. We got on the bus and drove straight through from Seattle, Washington to Lethbridge, Alberta. That one was a doozy. Going up to Prince George in BC, if you pull out the maps and see how far north Prince George is, Prince George back to Prince Albert was also a doozy, and taking a good 12 to 16 hours, I want to say, to get back home. But those are the trips. Those are the times, I think, when you hear about teams that come together and bond. Those are the trips that why teams in the Western Hockey League are always so close, even after their careers are over, how much guys stay in touch and continue to talk.
It's amazing because that's when I really started to want to gain that elusive tag as an honorary Westerner when I played with you in the American League, and Byron Ritchie was also on that Lethbridge team. And we were just laughing the other day because one of your teammates, the tough guy, Dale Purinton, who knocked out my 4 front teeth, but now we're Facebook friends. I mean, it's the beautiful thing about the game of hockey.
I mean, so many great guys. I think you wanted to become an honorary Westerner after the first trip to the Calgary Stampede. I think that's what really drew you into the West.
Well, we're going to get into the fun portion of the Will the Thrill trip tour. I mean, I've got my mom off camera here, and I mean, at some point, I'm going to get into. Remember when she and my dad dropped me off at the Delano Hotel in Miami with a whole carrying cooler of beautiful wine? We're going to get into that later because you and I have certainly had our fair share of fun. Were you always a winger? Did you play any other positions, Willie?
No, I was always a winger. I mean, growing up when I was younger, I played a little bit of defense when my dad was coaching. And again, I grew up in such a small town. We had only 10, 11 kids on the team. So I think the key was they put a little bit of the better skaters on the backhand to play defense to help cover things up. But then one year I really just got going, carrying the puck up the ice. My skating started to come around, and my dad and the other coach kind of talked about it and said he should probably play forward. So I always played the wing, always played right wing. I know a lot of times people talk, playing the off wing is better. I seem to struggle playing in the off wing. It was just more of a skating technique thing, not necessarily a vision or shooting, but I just felt a little bit different in my skating stride when I was starting out from the defensive zone on the off wing or turning that way to receive passes. So I always like to play the right side, and, obviously was very lucky enough to get into good situations and opportunities throughout my career to strive and learn from other great players and have a career at it.
Well, I was going to get into this in a little bit, but you segued me into it, I think, seamlessly. So now that you coach, like your dad coached you, you do a terrific job with the Hurricanes, we hope the future Hurricanes. Based on skating ability, I guess the way you shoot the puck and other instinctual attributes that a winger will have, what would be your general rule of thumb as to what guys should play on their natural side as wingers and what guys are better suited for the offside? What's your mindset?
Well, I think number one, you mentioned it right off the start. I think you have to look at the young player's skating ability. Does he have the ability to maneuver on his off wing, to have the vision? And then is he putting himself in the position to shoot all the time? If you're playing the off wing, like the elite player that Alex Ovechkin is on the power play, you see how much he reads the ice and he's able to get his body position in a place to shoot all the time. If a young player coming up is always receiving things on the backhand, or he's a step behind and getting open to his one-timer, there's no reason for him to play on that side because he's going to be a step behind. He's going to have to add that extra stick handle and pull it back to his forehand. Now, if I have an elite skating winger and he can turn and he can pivot and always find those positions, I think that's the biggest thing I look at, especially with all these young players and what we push all the time. And as I knew growing up as a kid, which was the hardest time going to the rink, when your coach said, we're going to spend 45, 50 minutes just skating today. That's the grind of it for a young player to mentally stay focused and stay energized to get through those skating sessions to get himself to the next level. But to me, playing your off wing and playing your offside on defense, to me, it all comes down to skating and your ability to get around those corners and anticipate the play to get to the right spot.
Well, I want to ask you about shooting because I remember our first practice together in New Haven, the Beast of New Haven. That puck just popped off your stick. And you were one of the rare guys that even if I knew where it was going and was always going glove high, that even if I got a head start, it still beat me with regularity like a rented mule. My question is, Willie, did you always shoot the puck well and naturally? What percentage do you think for a really good shooter, because you were an incredibly naturally talented shooter, is God-given, and how much do you think you can develop?
Well, I think it's a small percentage that's God-given. I think you look at everyone's kind of physique and their strength they have. I think people underestimate grip strength and forearm strength and things like that. But growing up is one of those things. I think I lived just outside of town. So it was my brother and I was probably 10-minute drive into town, 20-minute bike ride back in the day to get to my buddies. So what I was doing when no one was around and my brother was doing other things, I was outside shooting pucks and, putting the net out in the middle of the yard. One Christmas, my parents had a official, net made. It was full metal. So it wasn't a net that I was destroying every single day saying, hey, now I need a new plastic net. It was a real net. And just going out there and shooting puck after puck, working on release, working on puck position of where you can get the most power. And again, one of those things when you look at guys' physiques, I think I've always been lucky, and I know we're going to get into this story at some point, but I I was never very barrel chested. I didn't have a big chest like you, Tripper. You were the barrel chest kind of guy back in the day. And, to me, I always had the arms. So I always had big arms and was able to do, the guys always made fun of me. They're like, "What'd you do at the gym today?" I said, "Well, I would go and do curls." They're like, "Curls for the girls, Willis over there in the corner." And I'm like, well, that's what helps me shoot hard. And, you're working the lower body half so you could skate fast and have the quickness. But I knew I had to shoot. I wasn't the soft hands passing guy. So you kind of work out those areas to know that that can help you continue to have velocity and have strength in your shot.
It's interesting because you did have the gun show going, the curls for the girls, as you mentioned, partner. But you just really talked about, in your view, if I understood you correctly, that the barometer of the grip test is a definite barometer that you would look at. And I remember a few years ago, I can't get into this story now. Oh, I just can't. We're going to get in trouble on the first podcast. But I was having dinner with our dear friend John Forsland in Toronto with some Hurricanes fans, Rod Brindamore, a one-time line mate of yours, your centerman, and Glenn Wesley. And Glenn Wesley talked about the importance of the grip test. And Chuck Caden came out of, he hadn't said anything all dinner. And he made fun of the grip test as it related to, I can't go any further right now. We're going to get banned from the air. But Glenn Wesley certainly thought very highly of what the grip test means. And you just validated that. Speaking of Rod, what do you remember? Gosh, and we were talking about it a couple of days ago. When you hit the ground running, was it the 2000 home opener? Playing in a line with Roddy and Sammy Kapanen against Washington, 3 points. That's really what your NHL career took off in earnest, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was the first big night. I know there was a few call-ups in the 2 years prior to that. My first year in New Haven, getting called up a couple times, and then in Cincinnati, called up a couple times. But what we learned as young players in the Hurricanes organization, that Paul Maurice, our great coach, didn't have a lot of confidence in the young guy sitting on the bench. So you knew you were only going to get 1 or 2 shifts when you got called up. So we didn't really call that experience, or that was our big breakthrough. To me, it was really that opening night in that training camp. And I remember early on in that training camp, puck wasn't going in net for me. I was fighting it a little bit. And, after your career is over, you hear a few of these stories. And I heard there was quite a little bit of banter and arguing back and forth in the coach's office and with the general managers and scouts on where I fit in. And, it was kind of a split room going into the final exhibition game. I can't remember who we were playing that night, but I remember getting dressed and, I felt I had a pretty good camp. I wasn't obviously solidified in my position, but I remember walking out to the ice that night and Mo walking behind me. And Mo, he always had the dry sense of humor, but he always knew the right thing to say. And, as we're walking out to the ice, he's right behind me and I hear him go, "Hey, Willie." I'm like, "Yeah." And he just looks at me and he goes, "Would you shoot the effing puck tonight?" And like that just sunk in. And I mean, the first shift I come down and as soon as it got on my stick, I was launching everything and one found its way through. And scored in that exhibition game, and everything kind of just lifted off of me. And it was that one thing going into opening night. I knew what I had to do. I mean, I was put on a line with 2 guys I know I could have success with, and Rod, a guy who works so hard. You're going to have the puck because he wins every faceoff. And then the speedster and Sammy Kapanen and his goal scoring ability. We had some good combinations off. We mixed things up quite a bit in the first few games. I got a little bit of time with Ronnie Francis and Sammy, and then back with Roddy as Ronnie went back with O and Sammy, and then finally Marty Jonah landed on the left side with Rod and I. But to have a start in your first game where you have a goal and 2 assists, I mean, as a young player, and any young player will tell you, it just helps you so much going into that first month, which is going to be the grind of when all those veteran players really turn things up, and you're going to find out if you're going to be able to stay in this league or not.
Those 2 centermen you mentioned, obviously a Hall of Famer and Ron Francis, and we certainly hope as soon as possible a deserving Hall of Famer and Rod Brindamore. What were they like between shifts and in the locker room? Their styles in terms of letting you be or saying the right thing, just like you mentioned Paul Maurice did. What do you remember about that interaction?
Well, both very quiet. I think led by example. You knew you were going to get playing alongside Ron Francis. I mean, basically in my own mind, I just knew to try and get him the puck and then get open. He had such great vision and such a great passing ability. to get the puck back to you. And then Rod just, again, leading by example. He didn't have to say much. Going out to the ice, he'd just give you this look of say, let's go, kid. And you knew it, just the way he speaks. And that's why he's such a great coach and not asking anyone to do he wouldn't do. As soon as he speaks, you know it's time to go and you're energized and ready. Couple of funny stories playing with Ron. I wasn't officially on his line. I just happened to be on the ice with him. We're in Boston. It was my first year. And, you're young, you're excited, and you're racing around the ice, and we're in the offensive zone. And I keep calling for the puck. I'm like, Ronnie. And, it doesn't get to me, or it comes over, it gets back. And the shift goes by, and we finally get to the bench, and Ronnie's sitting right beside me. And he looks at me and goes, "Hey, kid." I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "Stop yelling my name." He goes, "I can see you." And I'm just like, "My apologies, Mr. Francis. I'll be quiet next time I'm on the ice with you. Just find me." And, funny story about Rod. Rod used to always, Craig Adams and I, my great roommate back in the day, we'd enjoy macaroni grill every day for pregame meal. We didn't get fed like these guys do now at the PNC. So we'd enjoy macaroni grill. And Rod used to get so mad because it gave me the worst heartburn. And the garlic that was leaking out of me one night, Rod finally snapped. He's like, "You got to stop eating at that place, Will." But both great guys. Again, the way they took care of us, all the veterans in the room, nothing really needs to be said. As a young guy, if you're just not watching these guys, you're missing out on so much.
Yeah, Will, the thrill. You mentioned Craig Adams because that was what was so special, and still all these years later, unique for me. Craig Adams was a teammate of mine at Harvard. He was a freshman when I was a senior, and then all of a sudden, I didn't play with him at all pro, but then you were with him in the American League, and then you end up living with him, as you mentioned, right near the arena. And so, as your color analyst, it was interesting because I had genuine friendships with all you guys, and you're now making the National Hockey League, and boy, we had some good times together. Let's just get into this for 1 second. We'll get back to the serious stuff. What do you remember about the one All-Star break that you and I, Bates Battaglia, went to a little place called Miami Beach?
If I had to describe it, I would say we were out of our element. Heading down to South Beach with you and the veteran Bates Battaglia was interesting my first year. You two tell me you're going down there. You'd been down there the year before, and I don't know what to expect. I'd never been to Miami except to play a hockey game, let alone South Beach. And we roll into this hotel, and I remember looking around going, this place isn't for us, but we made sure we acted like it, look good, feel good, play good, as we always used to say, Tripper. And we pulled off the part, I think, quite well down in South Beach. I'm sure if we asked anyone in South Beach, they would remember the three of us. I remember going out to the beach early one morning, you playing a solid hand of blackjack and losing a solid bet before having to maybe get your ear pierced before going out that night. It was always an interesting time when the three of us got together. The four of us, we included Craig Adams, the Harvard, as we called him. But I think that's the brotherhood you have, like you said, and mentioned of growing up and playing this sport, which is the best of how close these teams are and the fun times you get to have. And really the things you get to see are unbelievable, not only during all-star breaks, but on the road, in between games, going out for dinner, and just, talking and having fun with the guys.
Just to paint a vivid picture, you alluded to it. I didn't recognize that Bates was in the process of stacking the deck. And I said, if I lose this hand, I will get my ear pierced for the night. Okay. On the beach, which I did. But then the funny thing, if you remember, I got a T-shirt just to wear out that night, and it just said police. Okay. Yeah. So I have my ear pierced. I remember an individual came up to me at I think it was called the Crowbar that night. And she came up to me and she said, "Wow, are you a cop? I love cops." And my response was, "No, it's just a T-shirt." I regret the fact that I didn't play along, but that story.
She walked right away, and you looked at me, and I just shook my head, and you said, "Well, you missed that one." She was probably out of our league anyways, but we really dropped the ball.
Yeah. So, and then we had a wonderful time with Craig Adams, my one and only Calgary Stampede. It was just a really unique situation because here are these guys that, I played with in the American League, and in Adzy's case at Harvard. Adsy later went on much bigger than hockey, got my brother with the help of his father-in-law, God rest his soul, the heroic Paul Salucci out of prison in Venezuela. These are the great things about the game. And now we work together on television. Willie, I have to ask you this because a couple of things. Because you were such a great player. And scratching the surface, you had a very fine career. You were on the NHL rookie team. I guess my first question would be, and I'll get to health in a minute, in the Scott Stevens hit. But when you look at the game now, I mean, if you had played after the 2004-2005 work stoppage and the change in the rules, all for the good of taking out the hooking and the holding and really rewarding skill, you would have cleaned up. But you've always been, for me, as one of your dear friends. You're always happy, always smiling. Have you ever had any trouble with acceptance of what could have been if you played, say, 10 years later?
No, yeah, I know. Every time my parents call, I yell at them for about 5 minutes for having me 10 years too early. But I get over it quickly. No, I don't think so. I mean, there's always times when you see these games on television, or I think every player has thoughts of, imagine if this would have happened or this would have happened. But when you think about those things too, you also quickly realize that you wouldn't have some of the other things in your life if things were different back then. I mean, everyone's on a path and things are going to happen for a reason. And, I'm very happy with where I am right now. Like you said, the things I do now and getting back to my roots and being an ambassador for youth hockey and teaching and being around the rinks with our great families in Raleigh is always exciting to be involved in. And as you mentioned, one day, hopefully, a player from Raleigh, North Carolina gets his name called in the first round of the draft, like an Austin Matthews or first overall. And, we've seen a couple in Josh Wesley and Skylar Brindamore and, Alex Wilkins, I think, is a name we're going to hear about a lot in the future in Nashville's organization right now, who's home skating. So just to see these guys and how they continue to mature and grow. And, I'm happy being there. And then again, getting the opportunity from Fox to start a career on television and then working with you and John and now the Big Rig and Mike Maniscalco, the four of us, the chemistry we have and just the fun we have. I think being around the game, sure. Would I like to play 10 years in the National Hockey League? Yeah, that would have been awesome, but I didn't and things changed my path. But everything I do now is awesome. And I'm so happy. And every day I'm going to work and driving by people who you can tell are not happy to the office building they're driving to, but we're able to come in and be a part of a team and an organization that is a family. And I think that started a long time ago with Mr. Karmanos and Mr. Rutherford on how they wanted the office to be run and the feeling they wanted in there. And we see that every day with everyone who works in that building, as hard as they do, but the teamwork they provide together throughout any department that's in there, including ours and promotions, led by John Chase. And there's so many great things the team does now.
And for you, because I at times, as you know, I have a memory like an elephant, and I can, because we used to have some tremendous golf matches, and it was so much fun. The routine at Raleigh Country Club, and we'd come downtown, we'd go out for a nice dinner and paint the town, perhaps. And
you would paint because you lost.
Yeah, well, I always lost. All right, but so we hadn't seen each other. It was the summertime. And I remember you came to my place. We were all excited to go out to dinner. Bates, as we called him, the Batman, was probably going to join us. Remember, because you were so excited, you chipped my sink in my bathroom. And later on that night, we end up meeting your future wife, Ashley. So I guess and I distinctly remember it. I remember the privilege of being at your wedding and being a part of it. Was there a point, Will, where you said, A, I love this area of Raleigh, North Carolina, and this is going to be my home, and B, and I've asked Rod this question, what is it, you've just alluded to it, about the area and the Carolina Hurricanes that means so much to you? Because I think it's very clear and always has been with you that you love the area, you love the team.
Yeah, I think number one, from the area standpoint, I mean, you look at what it provides for your family. And I think that's something where I grew up back in Alberta in Canada. It was a very small town. And, we make our home out the east side of Raleigh and Garner, and you have the big city feel, but you can also have that small town atmosphere around the city of Raleigh. And I think that's what really attracted me. Was I'm not a big city guy. I don't think I'd be able to live in New York City or Miami or places like that, because it's not where I grew up. I grew up in a small town. Everyone knows everyone. And then you allude to something Rod always talks about, is how welcoming the people of North Carolina are, and how courteous they are, and how nice they are, no matter what the situation you're in, whether you're in a grocery store or you're in a restaurant, whatever. And I think that really attracted me here, along with the weather. I love snow, but I don't miss the snow back in Canada. And then I think, going into living here, part of staying in Raleigh, when, as you said, I met my wife who grew up here in Raleigh, and I said, "Do you want to move to Canada?" And it was a strong no, because she's a Southern girl. And if it gets down to 25 degrees, there's frustration in the home. So I said, we better stay here in the South and not brave the winter in Edmonton or Calgary. And then as far as the organization goes, I think the one thing that we learned very early, especially as players, that it's all about the community and being part of the fan base here. And I think I really realized what the organization was about. It was actually when I was traded, and the heartfelt messages I received from so many people in this city, the organization, Mr. Rutherford and Jason Carmanos, and reaching out to me throughout that whole time, and always making sure I was a part of the Hurricanes organization. Even though I wasn't here, I was still a teammate and I was still family. I think that's what the organization continues to do, and continues to push in support of this community, as the community supports it each and every night inside that building.
I think it's uniquely special, even among all the great other NHL teams, from that standpoint to this day. I'd be remiss, because of your perspective, now working in television, being the kind of player you were, and what you encountered. We didn't do the game on television, that particular game against New Jersey. I can remember it, and it took my breath away watching, because of how close I was to the ice, because the media row, it was actually in the lower bowl in the old New Jersey, the Meadowlands, or whatever the heck it was called. And it was right in front of me. And Scott Stevens did it to Derek Lindros. He was a masterful hitter. I think it was a tremendous hit. My question is, I happen to think the physicality in the game right now is terrific. Based on your perspective, the fact that you were on the receiving end of one of the great hitters, clean hitters in the history of the game, where do you view where physicality was, where it is now, if there's anything you would change, and your overall assessment?
I still think it's there. I think a lot of people are saying, the speed of the game, there's not that much checking, when to me there is, and there's almost as vicious of checks from back in now as there were back in the day, because of the speed of these players and how fast they're going on their ice. I think the league and the officials have done a great job in reducing the bad hits that we've seen during games and on televisions, and protecting players more. I think back in the day it was physical. There was a lot more, as you said, clutching and grabbing to slow the game down. But players still knew there were areas as they come through where they could get their shots in. And Scott Stevens was one of those guys. He patrolled the blue line. He knew players were always coming through at a high rate of speed. And as you said, it was a clean check. I've watched it before. I can't believe how bad television pictures were back in the day when you watch the replay of that thing. But really a broken play. Everyone asks, would you have done something differently? I'm like, well, not really, because it was a broken play. It wasn't like I carried the puck up the wing and then tried to make a move to the inside. The puck came from the far side to actually going to Ronnie Francis. He didn't get it clean. So I kind of came in to pick it up from him. And that's where Scott was. I always wondered if he was actually coming up to hit Ronnie. And then as the play developed, I just happened to be there because the puck came to me. But I wouldn't have changed anything. That's where the puck was. That's where I had to go. And like I said, it was a clean hit and a hard hit. But today's game, there are still some big hits, and these guys are moving at a rate of speed that we weren't back then. And you can still see the massive body checks. We saw them last year in the playoffs against the Cap Series. That thing was grueling and physical throughout all 7 games.
Yeah, it was. If there are any arguments that the pacification of the game, where's the physicality gone? Watch a series that was enthralling on every front. like that Cap series, and it certainly had every bit of the old song "Let's Get Physical" that you would ever want. Thinking about just a couple of rapid fire questions. NHL career, funniest teammate that you ever played with, because you have an underrated sense of humor that thankfully on TV people are now appreciating.
This guy I ever played with. Jeff O'Neill was pretty funny in the room. He was witty. He was funny. He was always having a good time. He knew when to flip the switch to be serious, Jeff. But I think he's having success on TSN radio right now because of his humor, his bluntness, on how he sees things. But he was always funny because just the way he kind of put things out there and laid things out there. Another guy who you know very well too, that played here just for a short stint, Paul Coffey, was pretty funny. And I was lucky enough to get called up a couple of times when Paul was here, and he'd take us for lunch. And he always had great humor too, from the way he viewed things of being the elder statesman inside the locker room.
Well, I wish you had been with me, because as you well know, Koff at one point, who was one of my favorite players, growing up, set me up with his sister-in-law. To think he could have ended up becoming my brother-in-law, and it was in your home province of Alberta. Koff said, "Trip, you and I, there's a Japanese steakhouse, Conky or something. You want to come to dinner with me?" And so it's just him and I wish you were there as a buffer. And he looks across the table and he goes, "Are you ready to get serious about Suzanne?" And I'm like, "No, Koff, I'm not ready yet." And he goes, "We'll cut her loose." And I listened to him. I cut her loose. She was a great girl.
Yeah, he was always teaching too. We'd get in the car sometimes and he'd always play. He'd always have the boss on. And he'd sit there and he'd turn it up and be like, "Now this is music, kid. The stuff you guys are listening to is horrible." He goes, "This is a musician. This is what music is."
But here's the funny thing, Thrill. And I was just fishing. I didn't get it. I was just trying to get swordfish in Florida. There's a song, "Don't Get," you know what a bad singer I am. You got the music and some song that I came into where we parked to travel. It's different, the hangar than it now than it was then. And it was one of these new songs, and Koff was jamming it. And so then they played it. I remember you guys were playing the Rangers at Madison Square Garden. They played it in warm-ups, and he, one of the greatest skaters of all time, and he was flying in warm-up. Okay, so he likes some of the new stuff too.
That's funny.
Sorry, but I don't know if at some point we're going to have Koff on this show. My question always was and is: Koff could hit you with a great zinger. If you hit Koff with a great zinger, could he take it?
I think he could. It depends on the guy. If it was a guy that he wasn't like expecting it from, he's definitely not going to take it from a rookie, I'm sure, unless you were tight with him. But you had to be on the same level as Koff to be able to zing him back, I think.
Yeah, and I agree with you. Jeff O'Neill, as you well know, he and I had a Kramer and Seinfeld living setup in downtown Raleigh. He lived across the hall. I remember, I don't think he's going to be MacGyver anytime soon. At one point, he comes over just randomly because we left our doors open, and he emptied his dustbuster in my disposal in my kitchen sink. It ruined my disposal, and he just thought no big deal. What are you thinking? This is home upkeep and home appliances 101. He did have a good dry sense of humor, though.
Yeah.
Greatest, any particular prank reigns supreme that jumps out within the locker room, on the plane, on the bus, in the hotel that you could tell us about?
There weren't a lot of pranksters on our team. In the room, I know everyone used to love messing around with Pete Friesen all the time. Just little things like that. The best prank I ever saw goes all the way back to my junior days. So a couple of guys in the locker room, actually both first-round draft picks, and Steve Kelly was first-round draft pick by the Edmonton Oilers, played a little bit of time with Tampa, and Brad Church, who was a first-rounder to the Caps, who never saw any time in the NHL. But they thought it'd be funny to take what little money we had in junior and take out a paper article selling a boat for, dirt cheap. Dirt cheap. It was basically new, and they put the price of this boat was dirt cheap. But the phone number they left was our assistant coach. And they also put on there is that I work late. Please call after 11 p.m. So our assistant coach's phone is ringing nonstop post 11 p.m. every single night. And he is losing his mind trying to figure out what's going on. He's yelling at people. I don't have a boat for sale. What are you talking about? And he finally gets around to somebody tells him where it was, and he looks. And so unfortunately, the other assistant coach on our team was a cop. So he was able to go to the paper and figure out who sent this in, getting the two names of the guys, realizing it was these two. And they didn't say anything. We came to practice one day, everything's fine, and they're laughing. They're still giggling about it, because he'd come in and tell how many phone calls he got the night before. And we go out for practice, and it was a long one. We had a good sweat that day, and we come in, we're all getting undressed, and these two guys sat beside each other. And they start getting undressed, and they start pulling off their T-shirts and stuff like that. And their skin is all turned green. And we're all looking at them going, what's wrong with your skin? And they're like, what's going on? They look like green everywhere. And the two coaches come in, and they are dying laughing. And the cop of the team had gotten the powder or whatever they put in money when they know there's going to be a robbery or something go down that explodes over the thief. And they had dumped it in their laundry bags. So as these guys started to sweat and get wet, it just turned, they were stained green for like 3 days. So that was probably one of the best pranks I've ever seen. Well thought out prank compared to just the leaner of a water bucket on your hotel door. Back in the day, if you stole somebody's remote, that was the worst. Out of their hotel room, if you got in there and took their remote, that was the worst.
Yeah, and back when you played, now guys, it's just their entry-level contracts that they have roommates. Back when you played, I want to say it was 600-700 games or 10 years in the league before you got your own room. Who were your roommates in your NHL career?
My roommate was Tommy Westland.
Oh, he was a good one. Good.
Yeah, he was a good roommate. I really was. I'm not a great roommate because of my snoring issues.
Well, especially you come back from the macaroni grill. Oh boy,
that's right. Between that and the snoring, it was out of control. But Tommy, he never got mad about it. He would just say, he knew a routine. So when we got in bed at night, the nightstand that's between the two beds, Tommy would always slide the drawer out. And middle of the night, I'd hear the drawer bang, and I'd realize I was snoring. So I'd roll over, and he had it down pat. He'd just hit it. It would bang hard enough where it would pop back open. So if you had to hit it again later that night, it started. But speaking of that, the first year I made the Hurricanes team, training camps in Fort Myers, Florida. And so all the young guys ended up coming in on the same plane together, and we're all in a cab going to the hotel, and we're getting our keys. And, guys are like, oh, I'm rooming with you. And I get a key with no one's number. And I'm like, who am I rooming with? And they're like, none of us, Willie. You probably got, of course we make the funny joke. You got stuck with some European guy. You're going to be brutal the whole week. And I'm like, oh man. So I go up to my room. I scan the key. I push the door open, and Ronnie Francis is sitting on the other bed. And I'm like, what the, I was like immediately nervous. I'm like, hello, and he's like, hey kid, what's going on? It's super nice. And we'd go for dinner together and skate, and we'd come back to the room. And the first night, he tosses me the TV remote, and it's early. It's like 9 o'clock, but Ronnie's like going to sleep. And I'm like, you want me to turn it off? And he's like, no, you're fine. I had the volume on 1. I wasn't disturbing a future Hall of Famer. I'm looking at the TV, and finally I just shut up and go to sleep. And so a day goes by, 2 days go by, and finally we're sitting there eating lunch one day. He goes, hey, a little bit of a snoring problem, huh, kid? I'm like, oh no. This guy's a Hall of Famer. I'll get booted out of his room in training camp. So he comes back from the rink that day, and I'm laying on my bed, and he throws this box at me, and it hits me in the chest. And he goes, you're going to try these tonight. And he throws me a pack of Breathe Rights. So I'm putting Breathe Rights on every night as I'm going to bed to try and stop the snoring. He said it helped enough where it didn't bother him anymore. But I was just like, man, I'm going to get cut for my snoring problem with Ron Francis.
Was that when we were down there for a while? Because I want to tell you, somebody was supposed to room with the great Tom Barrasso.
Did he ex-nay that one?
I think he might have waltzed in the room and waltzed back out and said, oh no, you ain't rooming with me, kid. I remember, and I love Tommy B. Tommy B, Ray Whitney, a fellow Westerner, he always said it best, because Tommy B was a dapper dresser. And he would do it correctly, Will, the thrill, where his pants, or some call them trousers, he'd have them right probably above his belly button. So Ray Whitney would say, he's the only guy that I've ever known that reaches over his wallet reaches over his shoulder to get his wallet. His pants were so high.
Yeah, I've heard that one. He was the only one. He'd come to the rink. I mean, he was the guy that he was as professional as they look. If he was wearing jeans, he still had on the sport coat at day of a practice. He'd come in ready to go.
Yeah. He told me, he said at one point, wonderful wife. He overachieved, and I loved his time as a Hurricane. We're friends to this day. And I said, Tommy, when did you know she was the one she was the one you were going to ask to marry her? And he said, I was at a party. I think it was with Pittsburgh. And, she got sick at the party, and we were driving home. I want to say it was in his Rolls Royce. And, she was going to get sick, and she threw up in her purse. That's when he knew. Didn't get not even a drop on the rolls. The great Tommy B.
That's a keeper.
Oh my gosh. When he was on his game as a former goalie, he was one of my favorites of all time to watch. The one of the rooming memory. And I only had 3 games. In my last game that I got sent down after in New York, I wasn't dressing, but I traveled with the team. And we had a plane issue, so we had to go in the day of the game. So I'm rooming with Steve Chason, and I go in, and I think, I guess I'm just going to take in this experience and try to nap even though I'm not dressing. And as soon as my key hit the door, he goes, "Hey, kid, go take a walk." I didn't even get into the room. Where was your rookie dinner?
Rookie dinner was in Minneapolis. I can't remember the name of the steakhouse, but I remember we had played the day before in Calgary. And then we were going to have the day off to travel. We stayed the night in Calgary, which made it even tougher because Calgary's a great city, very close to my hometown. So after that game was a little bit of a runaway with my boys from back home. Get up the next morning, get on the plane. We fly to Minneapolis, we shower up, and then we all go out for dinner that night to the stakeout. I wish I could remember the name of it, but all the waiters had on the white kind of steakhouse jackets. They made sure they got a few of those for us rookies to put on. All the trainers were there. It was a good time. We got provided a few shots from the guys. They like to continue to buy those because they know you're paying for them. And we had to sing a couple songs. I remember a family was there with their daughter, younger, and the boys made us go over and sing happy birthday to them at the table. Every time we sang, I think we had to apologize for how bad it was. And then we came back, we had to tell jokes and make everyone laugh. And then the hardest part was they said, you guys got to sing a song in front of the entire restaurant, but it's got to be like, you guys got to figure out what you're going to sing. And go back to Craig Adams at Harvard. I'm like, I'm not a very good musician. Like, I don't know a lot of words to songs. So Craig Adams gets a pen and writes down word for word to Kenny Rogers, the Gambler. And we get up, Craig Adams, myself, Joe Vasicek, and I want to say David Tanabe was there, and sing the Gambler word for word, thanks to Craig for writing it down in front of this entire restaurant. The boys give us a standing ovation. And then the next day at practice, as it goes, you have a good hard practice, and Paul Maurice makes sure he grinds on the rookies a little bit. And it was a long day to say the least.
Kenny Rogers, as you well know, God rest his soul, recently just having left us a huge Caniac, and the Gambler, one of the great songs. I just heard randomly on the radio the other day, Islands in the Stream, Kenny and Dolly Parton. What a tune that is. You know what that was? Because, Willie, full disclosure, I might have been out with you in Calgary, and I think it was a Saturday night, and it was Minnesota's first year in the league, and you guys weren't playing Minnesota until Wednesday.
Yeah, I think that's right. It was a long break.
I remember, because I remember John Forsen and I sitting at the hotel bar, and we were at beautiful St. Paul Hotel. What a beautiful spot. We were going to go over because Minnesota was playing on Sunday night, and we weren't even playing until Wednesday. And my gosh, the couple of days. It was in the middle of December, record low temperatures. I remember getting stranded outside, nearly frozen. That story is for another day. But that was the rookie. Okay, I remember that very well. I wonder if you guys went to Manny's, maybe over in Minneapolis, even though we were staying in St. Paul for your Ken Rogers bit. What would you say, because you're doing a terrific job? Oh, gosh, I love when you travel with this. Like that was so much fun in the Washington series because you were on the road, you and I going out for dinners. We may have smoked a cigar en route to that Brock McGinn triumphant ending in that series. What have you enjoyed most about television? What have you found to be the most exciting challenge from when you started, both with Mike Maniscalco? You've done some color, and the biggest takeaway is the overall experience.
Well, it's been great. I mean, so exciting each and every night. We have so much fun. I think a key for me has been the great supporting help around us, as the Admiral Adam Holzman and our crew inside the truck that does such a great job every night helping us prepare for these shows. But I think probably the biggest hurdle when you first come on is when you get these scripts of the ideas you're talking about. And, I started back in the day with Chantel McCabe, and we'd get at the desk and we'd have a little script in front of us of where we're going to go. And I would see this number beside it, and it would say I had, this segment was going to be 1 minute and 30 seconds. And I'm like, wow, that's pretty quick. And so I would get through my thought and there would still be a good 45 seconds to go. And I'm like, well, that's all I got, So I think learning the timing of television and really of how it all works and how exciting it is behind the scenes to put on the show. I mean, it kind of, from a player's aspect, gives me the utmost respect for everything you guys do and what those guys do outside in producing a show to make it look so good. But I think for me, being an ex-player, as you see players who leave the game, I think the ability I've had and the opportunities I've had to stay around the game and around the locker room in the roles I have helped me, stay engaged and, stay happy in everything I'm doing in life, because you get those opportunities to be around the guys. And I think you probably can attest to, from, as you talked about our friendships of playing a little bit in the minor leagues and then getting to this level, of how much that background and those relationships help you in your day-to-day job. So I think me knowing a lot of these guys, probably not as close to a lot of them as you are, I think knowing them and knowing a little bit of their background, I think that really helps me kind of be able to tell the right story on television of the way they're thinking and what they're doing and the things they're going through, from not only my experiences, but knowing them and what they deal with on a day-to-day basis.
It's, it just popped out to me. It was, thankfully Jordan Staal came back, but of all of your great moments where something has popped out to you that identifies with your playing career. And that's the highlight of the television experience. Remember when Jordan Staal got popped by the guy on Tampa? It was a tough hit, and it was the end of the first period, and the Hurricanes were marching towards a playoff spot. And I really, Jordan would come back from a concussion. And I thought what you said, of course, then, everybody knows about the hit between you and Scott Stevens. That you just remind that moment, Shane. What do you remember? Because I thought that was exceptional television on your part in the immediate aftermath of that Jordan Staal hit and what you said.
Yeah, it was, I think, one of those areas where everything kind of comes back to you, and knowing not only where Jordan is as he was in a vulnerable position, but almost what that other player is thinking. Because as an athlete and as a competitor, you're going to try and find weaknesses in a player. And when some of these players are getting hit or getting popped, and what they've started buckling down on, I think has been good for the league, is the players turning away from that. You think of a guy like a Matt Cook in Pittsburgh, how he would always be a guy looking for that vulnerable position. And I just felt that in that position, Jordan was in a very vulnerable position, and a player had the opportunity to avoid him. Yes, it's a very fast game, and yes, you're told to finish each and every check. But I think the ability of where the game is going and the respect player to player is getting to a much higher level, to where he could have turned and drove his shoulder into Jordan's shoulder, into his chest, and totally avoided his head. I think those are things that I'm able to see. And again, the help of our crew, as you know, and your replays and everything you're breaking down is so key to being able to see what you're talking about and get through it. And I think so many things played a factor in the way we were talking there, the way John saw it and his call on it, to us being able to do exactly what the fans wanted at home. And that's what they want. They want the behind the scenes look. And I think our team is able to do such a great job of showing that and telling the stories that are going on beyond the ice level.
Yeah, and they want you to just be yourself, and because that's when you have the best chance of being riveting, of providing good content. You and I seem to always see the game for the most part the same way, but if we do disagree, again, that's great television. You mentioned, and he is the producer of this podcast as well. And you never see him, okay? What he does behind the scenes. But how would you describe Adam the Admiral Holtzman, other than because he's going to end up being a very popular member of this podcast is his baby. How would you describe the man?
I'm trying to think of the right
Other
word.
than he wears clothes about 9 sizes too small.
He enjoys the color salmon.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But I think he's dedicated and understands the game to be able to provide what we're looking at. I think that's why he and the big rig, Mike Maniscalco, and I have such good chemistry, if you would, with the pregame show. I think whenever we're emailing back and forth, or even when I'm not traveling and I'm here at home, he's texting me or I'm texting him a time of the game, see if we can get that. And I think he helps us understand how television really works on some things we ask for. He's like, that's impossible. You can't do that. I'm like, well, it'd make it so much better if we could. Well, it's impossible. But so he's an educator to me. But I think, again, when you go back to what makes a successful team is having the friendships and the ability to laugh and joke as we do when I am traveling on the plane. I mean, it's constant banter, but we know when it comes down to work, the work is going to be there and we're prepared because of all that. So I think a great team atmosphere. We had a great team dinner in Boston last year. Unfortunately, you couldn't make that one. But it was a great outing with the crew to make sure we're always on the same page. And again, when you're pushing for the same thing, you're on the same.
Why didn't I make that dinner? Did I have a guest in town?
Yeah, a guest in town.
Okay, yeah, that's right.
Guest in town. Yeah.
Yeah. North End. You're right. We have an all-inclusive crew. Everybody gets along. Everybody's pulling on the rope. And I just wanted to ask you about the Admiral because this podcast is his baby, and he's going to be all in and all invested with his shorts that barely 9 sizes too small and way too short. But
I wonder what he wore. He did say he was going to play soccer last night. Like, what's he wear to soccer?
I don't know. He's in love. You just don't know. At some point, he's going to make some appearances on the podcast with regularity, and hopefully, he's going to be putting together pregame shows soon before the play-in series with the New York Rangers. We talked about
maybe even some post-game shows.
And some post-game shows for the Admiral, hopefully after some wins. He grew up an Islander fan, so if the Canes were playing the Islanders, he in his short shorts, he'd really be conflicted. But how do you see, we talked about it a few weeks ago, announced yesterday, training camps, if it stays as it is now, starting July 10th. What are the things you're thinking about between now and the potential drop of the puck in game one between the Hurricanes and Rangers as to factors of which team is going to hit the ground running?
Well, I think number one, both teams are relying on the health of some of their players that were out. The Carolina Hurricanes missing Dougie Hamilton and Brett Pesce, Sammy Vatanen, who they got in a trade. That, two of those three are probably going to be back in the lineup. Is Chris Kreider 100% for the New York Rangers because he is such a huge loss for them before the stoppage of play. So number one, the health of the team. Two, you look at the preparation. To me, I give the nod to Rod Brind'Amour and his coaching staff and how prepared they will be to play the New York Rangers. I think the Hurricanes are probably loving the fact that it's not going to be in Madison Square Garden, whereas, calling games, the success has not been there. And then to me, really, it's a flip of a coin of who can come out. And we talk about preparation, and I think Rod, one of the reasons I give them the nod and why they're going to be so good to start is, yes, they show clips of their team, and yes, they know what the Rangers will be doing, but his number one focus is his own bench and what they're doing to exit the defensive zone, what they're doing in the neutral zone, how their forecheck is going. It's not what the other team is doing. It's what is the Hurricanes doing right from the start. I think that's going to be such a huge focus too, as we hear it all the time, and it's cliche, who gets to their game first. And if the Hurricanes can have that quick start And game one, talk about a 5-game series. Game one is so very important in this series.
And he was, when you broke out in the NHL, he was your centerman. You know how gifted Rod is at being able to eloquently deliver a message. He's certainly the kind of guy, if you're ever in an alley late at night, you need someone, he will be there any day that ends in a Y. We also know, though, he, as a player and now as a coach, he hates the hotels. I mean, if he could, he'd be coming home between every game. So, and I bring that up, Thrill, because I think this is a major X factor, because the team that ends up winning the cup is going to probably be in that hotel to the rink, directly back to the hotel for 2.5 months. So I'm just thinking Rod might have a real X factor of being able to say, boys, I don't love the hotel, but let's all dig in and jump in the bunker together and get that desperation, knowing his personality.
Well, I think that's another part of where a team may have their success is which team comes up with the most creative ways to keep their players energized and active inside their hotels. Because when they get to these cities, wherever they might be, this might be a full lockdown in this hotel. Like, your food will be served to you there. You're not going to be going outside to restaurants. Like, people aren't going to be coming in that hotel. It's going to be on full lockdown. So what can you do creatively with your coaching staff, your trainers? Are you having movie nights in one of the media lounges? What are you doing? Is it game night? Are you having big poker tournaments? Because that's the thing. You don't want your players just laying in their room 24/7. That's no good for anybody. So how can you provide an atmosphere that doesn't allow these guys to drift from the task at hand? And that's winning the Stanley Cup. Because, as though some of these players are a little bit on the fence about doing this, once they step on the ice, the focus is there and every player is going to achieve the same goal.
Great points, Willie. You're getting me to think about things I hadn't thought about. As we wrap this up, boy, in that Washington series, so many sensational stories, and what a win for the Hurricanes. I'd love to see the Hurricanes end up playing Washington again. You could argue that Warren Fogle was the X factor in that series, a guy that has to almost come out of nowhere, that you couldn't win without that contribution. If you had to pick one X factor on this Hurricanes roster, your gut, that's going to come out of nowhere and be a big part of a long playoff run, who would that player be?
There's a couple of names. Obviously, one of the bigger ones is Dougie Hamilton healthy and can he get back on stride? That's he's not really my X factor, because if he's 100% and going, what he's going to bring. So my X factor kind of goes between two players who I think can change the dynamic of this lineup, and especially if they find chemistry amongst themselves. So I'm going to go a little bit with the older statesman in Vincent Trocheck. I think that trade at the deadline, I think what he can bring, his grit, his speed, his skill, could be that X factor, and combine him with my young pick of a Marty Necas. I think this player has a huge upside, and I think the two of them together are the guys I'm going to be watching to see if they can contribute on the score sheet of doing those things to push this team deep into this playoff run.
I love that. I love how much Vinny Trocheck so evidently, just saw him on Instagram yesterday, loves being a Carolina Hurricane. And I love the charisma that Marty Necas has. He has self-belief, and you need to have it to come through in clutch times. Here's an X factor just with my gut, which I'm hoping is on the reduction front. But Brady Shea, he's had to play as a lefty, his right side, because of the injuries to Brett Pesce and Dougie Hamilton before the break, and Sammy Bodden. All those guys are going to be available. So he shifts back to his natural side, playing against a New York Ranger team. He didn't want to, he wanted to be a Ranger. Now he's comfortable being a Hurricane. He's motivated. He'd be my X factor, moving back to a position to succeed, his natural side. I can't thank you enough for doing this. I just have to ask one follow-up before I let you go, Will the Thrill. That was so funny when you were talking about you and Craig Adams going to the Macaroni Grill, for your pregame, and Rod saying, because of heartburn, who knows, any type of breath that could kill a wombat. I have no idea. He said, Willie, you got to stay away from there. Where were you sitting? Were you on the bench? Were you locked?
No, we're on the bench. So one of the worst things I used to get, and of course, it probably goes back to Macaroni Grill. The food's great. I'm not downplaying Macaroni Grill, but the amount of garlic that was in one of the dishes that I think my nerves before NHL games, I was always hammering Tums. So, you come off from a shift or you're sitting there and there's always the gas, the burps and everything are going. And Rod was right beside me. And I remember he coming in, he sat down, I had just burped and his head snapped to the left and he was legitimately mad. Like it was not playing anymore. He was mad. Willie, stop it. Like, this is ridiculous. It was one of those parts where he was just mad.
I love it. Then, that gaze with his mouth guard, never a half shield, no visor. He looked like a velociraptor. Hey, listen, in your defense, there may have been a time, I'm going to be in his doghouse for saying this, there may have been a time that I've offered him a mint or two.
He's a gum guy. He's a gum guy. Look at him on the bench.
Oh my God, he chumps it. You know what? If Hubba Bubba comes back, they should see if he could be an advertiser for me. And you always know if he's happy. If he is unhappy behind the bench, he's going to war with that gum.
Hey, when David Ayres stepped on the ice in Toronto, that gum took a beating.
Oh my gosh, it got massacred. Will the Thrill, happy birthday in Australia. Happy birthday here tomorrow as we're doing this on Friday, your birthday tomorrow. I'm so grateful to have you in my life. Can't wait to see you again. And thank you for joining the podcast.
Thanks, buddy. Get back here soon, my friend.
I will.